If you think betrayal always comes with slammed doors and screaming matches, think again. Sometimes it slips quietly through a text message at 2:47 a.m. while you're thousands of miles away, worn out from a 14-hour shift. That was how my marriage of 19 years detonated in the most unexpected way. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 53 years old, and I've spent nearly 3 decades as a commercial cargo pilot flying routes that stitch together every corner of the globe. The cockpit had always been my second home, metal gauges, endless sky, and I thought I'd built a stable life down on the ground too. I was still in my uniform shirt when the buzz rattled across the nightstand of my hotel room in Frankfurt. My hands smelled faintly of jet fuel and coffee when I picked up the phone. The message from Elena, my wife, burned onto the screen. "I'm done, Dan. I've met someone younger and I'm moving to Miami with him. I've emptied the accounts. Don't call me." Beneath it was a screenshot of our joint savings account, a balance that had once been just over $130,000, now standing at a merciless 0.00. She even added a heart emoji as if this were some kind of cheeky joke. I didn't throw the phone, didn't curse at the ceiling. Instead, I typed back 2 words. "Good luck." Then I powered the device off, set it face down, and headed for the shower. The cold water hit harder than the text. The next morning, the crew noticed my silence. I skipped the usual buffet breakfast, grabbed a black coffee to go, and focused on the pre-flight checks. Hector, my first officer and longtime friend, glanced over during the walk-around inspection. He knew better than to ask. When you've got 200 tons of steel and cargo waiting to cross the Atlantic, personal pain doesn't get to ride shotgun. Hours later, during the layover in New York, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop in the crew lounge and scrolled through my email. Sure enough, the divorce papers were already filed. Elena's attorney, one of those slick Miami lawyers who specialized in high net worth separations, had built the case that I'd abandoned the marriage by being gone too often. They wanted spousal support pegged to my overseas salary, painting me as some absent tyrant who valued air miles over family dinners. The gut punch wasn't the legal jargon. It was the add-on: her so-called emotional partner was living in our townhouse back in Charlotte. I closed the lid, leaned back in the vinyl chair, and breathed slow. I'd been flying long enough to know panicking mid-air only leads to disaster. That night, I sent exactly 1 email, not to Elena, but to my cousin Marcus, a financial consultant in Chicago. The message contained just a short phrase we'd invented years earlier over Whiskey Activate Blackbird protocol. No explanations. He knew. 3 minutes later, the reply pinged back. "Already moving. Don't engage. Land safely first." I had 12 more days on the roster before I could request leave. 12 more nights in anonymous hotels, balancing time zones, shepherding shipments across oceans, while the ground I thought was solid back home dissolved into quicksand. Any other pilot might have declared a family emergency and called in relief. But I've never been wired that way. Finish the route, collect the paycheck, keep the logbook clean — that was my code. As I rolled my overnight bag back into the fluorescent hallway of the JFK crew quarters, our chief pilot stopped me. "Everything holding steady?" he asked. He wasn't asking about the Airbus. "All under control," I replied, and in a strange way, it was just not the way Elena thought. I'd met her almost 2 decades earlier at a bookstore cafe in Raleigh. She was working the register, teasing customers about their choices, calling Hemingway training wheels and Tolstoy a dare. I admired her spark immediately. I was already a seasoned pilot then, racking up international hours, but home for a month's rest. 11 months later, we were married in a small chapel with friends crammed into pews, optimism buzzing in the air. Back then, my life felt mapped: steady salary, retirement plan, home fully paid off thanks to early real estate luck. She said she loved my discipline, the way I seemed unshakable, immune to turbulence. I loved her fire, her way of making strangers laugh within minutes. At first, the rotation schedule didn't bother her. 2 weeks gone, 1 week home. The money was good, better than most families we knew. We convinced ourselves it was worth the trade-off. I'd keep flying the heavy cargo routes, she'd anchor the home front, and together we'd build a future. By year 13, hairline fractures had appeared. She'd sigh when I missed birthdays, make pointed remarks about neighbors' husbands who grilled steaks every Sunday. The year I turned 49, she stopped asking when I'd be home at all. Video calls shortened to perfunctory check-ins. At Christmas, I found our house entirely redecorated, new furniture walls, repainted without her mentioning it. Needed a change was all she said. I ignored the weight in that phrase. 2 months before my Frankfurt run, I'd noticed withdrawals from our joint account flowing into one under her maiden name. House repairs, she'd explained. But when I drove by before takeoff, there was no contractor, no scaffolding, just a sleek black BMW parked in the driveway that didn't belong to us. Weeks later, she stopped answering my calls altogether, sending only quick texts, busy with a project. Our neighbor, Mr. Hanley, an old retired mechanic, snapped a photo of a moving van outside and sent it to me with the caption, "Thought you'd want to know." I stared at it but chose not to reply. Sometimes the cruelest truths surface without you lifting a finger. Sometimes silence is the only throttle you control. The real turbulence was yet to come. The second night after Elena's message, my phone buzzed on the hotel nightstand. It was Marcus calling through an encrypted app we'd used for years. "Sit down, Dan," he said without preamble. "Tell me, she's been siphoning money for over a year. Started small, 2 grand here, 3 there, but in the past 90 days the transfers spiked. Total damage 210,000 euros, more than just the savings account she flaunted in that screenshot." The number hit me like sudden turbulence. I pressed my palm to my forehead, fighting the dizziness. That was well beyond what we'd had in joint accounts. "She also forged your name on a home equity line of credit," Marcus continued. 45,000 against the Charlotte townhouse. And 6 months ago, she changed the beneficiary on your life insurance. All of it lines up with her maiden name. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed. 19 years together, and she had been dismantling our life piece by piece while sending me cheerful texts about how much she missed me. And the guy, I asked finally. His name's Tyler Brooks, 26, former fitness instructor, patchy employment. Pattern's ugly. He's had at least 3 relationships with women over 45 in the last few years. Each ended within 18 months. All the women left marriages or long-term partners and walked away broke. The file pinged into my inbox as Marcus spoke. Court records, social media, old newspaper clippings. I didn't need anyone to spell it out. She wasn't just leaving me, she was disappearing with a con artist by her side. Marcus's voice grew lower. "One more thing. Charges on a credit card for 2 one-way tickets to Miami next Tuesday. That was 4 days away. She wasn't playing at separation. She was vanishing with everything." I set the phone down, sat in the dim light, and let the hum of the hotel AC fill the silence. Memories rearranged themselves in cruel new shapes. Late-night calls. She'd stepped outside to take her sudden obsession with fitness 3 years ago. The unexplained tension over money despite our stable savings. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditation. The pain hardened into something else. Resolve. I powered up my laptop, logged into the shell corporation Marcus and I had set up nearly a decade ago, Silverwing Holdings. The balance stared back $1.7 million. For 8 years, 70% of my salary had gone straight there, reported on taxes but walled off legally from marital property. I typed one sentence into an email to my attorney in Chicago. Linda Chen, initiate Frostfall protocol. Then I closed the lid and went downstairs for coffee. For the first time in days, I actually felt hungry. When my final rotation ended 12 days later, I landed in Chicago instead of Charlotte. Marcus met me at O'Hare, handed me a burner phone and a slim folder. "She doesn't know you're back. Only me and Linda are aware." We slid into his SUV and headed downtown. "Bank froze the account she wired the money into," he explained. "Large, unusual transfers triggered their system. She's been calling nonstop trying to unfreeze it, but they need you to verify in person. She thinks you're still in Germany." He opened his tablet and showed me a series of texts intercepted from her iCloud, which she'd foolishly left linked to my Apple ID when she upgraded her phone. Lines of conversations scrolled by between Elena and Tyler. They joked about me flying tin cans while they spent my money. They discussed their deposit on a condo in Miami, closing date set for the following week. Then one thread caught my eye. Elena Bank froze the transfer. "They need Dan in person. What do we do, Tyler? Tell him it's your mom emergency. Get him to give you power of attorney. He'll cave." "Elena, he isn't answering my calls." Tyler, push harder. "We need that cash before the condo closes. If not, we go with plan B." "Elena, I'm not comfortable with plan B." "Tyler, it's just insurance. He's in a risky job for a reason. Accidents happen all the time." My grip tightened around the folder. Marcus watched me silently. "These are admissible?" I asked, backed up straight from her cloud, time-stamped, unaltered. My hands were steady, but inside something went ice cold. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was conspiracy. Linda was waiting in her office downtown. She had already drawn up emergency filings divorce petition motion to freeze assets, criminal complaint for forgery, and a restraining order request. She slid a thick stack across the desk. "We have one complication," she said. "Yesterday, Elena filed a domestic violence claim against you, alleging emotional abuse and financial control. She's pushing for a restraining order and exclusive use of the townhouse." I laughed bitterly. "I've been in Europe for the last 7 weeks. How does that hold up? As a tactic?" "It's common," Linda said. "But we can dismantle it. Your company's security badge logs place you in and out of airports across Europe continuously. Passport stamps confirm it, and your call records show no hint of threats or harassment. We'll move to have her claim dismissed for perjury." I signed every page she placed before me. "One more thing," she added, sliding over another document. "This motion nullifies the condo purchase and places an emergency lien on any LLC tied to Tyler Brooks. We'll present the text messages as evidence of conspiracy." My chest loosened for the first time since that midnight text in Frankfurt. For the plan to work, Elena couldn't know I was back. She still thought I was somewhere over the Atlantic racking up flight hours. That illusion was our strongest weapon. That night I stayed at Marcus's loft overlooking the river. From his kitchen counter, we watched security camera footage from the Charlotte townhouse. I'd installed the system 3 years earlier and still had full access. There was Tyler lounging by the pool in my favorite hoodie drinking scotch from my collection. Elena paced back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, frustration etched into her posture. Things weren't going smoothly. Marcus closed his laptop. "She thinks she's the one setting a trap," he said quietly. "But by the time those deputies knock on your door, she'll realize it's the other way around." I stared at the city lights flickering off the river. For the first time in weeks, I felt the engines of my life shift into a new heading. We were no longer circling in holding pattern. The descent had begun. The morning sun bled through the blinds of Marcus's loft, but I'd been awake for hours. My mind replayed every move Elena and Tyler had made, every forged signature, every whispered conversation caught on her cloud backup. By 8 o'clock, Linda called with updates. The judge scheduled the emergency hearing for this afternoon. "We'll motion to dismiss her domestic violence claim and push to freeze all joint assets. Judge Porter has no tolerance for fabricated accusations. We'll bring your travel records, badge scans, and those texts discussing Plan B. That alone could sink them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me through the phone. "What about the townhouse?" "She already drained the equity loan and moved the funds into an LLC under Tyler's name. We've traced it, and we're attaching it to the emergency lien. By law, they can't move a cent until the court rules." Marcus leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee, eyes never leaving me. "She thinks she's got you boxed in, but every move she made leaves a paper trail." Around midday, Marcus pulled out a manila folder. "You'll want to see this," he said. Inside were photographs our neighbor Mr. Hanley had taken, furniture being loaded into a moving truck. My grandfather's writing desk, an heirloom I'd refinished by hand, now in the hands of strangers. Family photo frames stacked like junk. "They're stripping the house," Marcus said. I closed the folder, slowly, feeling something shift deep in my chest. Some thefts go beyond money. Some cut at the bones of who you are. "I want to be there," I said. "When they're served, I want Elena to see my face. I won't hide behind paperwork." Linda hesitated over speakerphone. "Dan, that's risky. If she knows you're back, she might bolt before the deputies arrive." Then we set it up carefully. "I'll stay across the street at Hanley's. Tomorrow morning when the deputies serve them, I'll step into view. She needs to know she didn't outsmart me." There was silence. Then Linda exhaled. "All right. But you let me handle the timing. The papers will be served at 9 a.m. sharp." The 6-hour drive to Charlotte felt like taxiing before takeoff, slow, deliberate, every minute tightening the anticipation. Marcus drove while I reviewed the evidence again, bank statements showing systematic withdrawals, phone records proving her endless calls with Tyler, credit card charges for hotels within our own city when she claimed to be visiting her sister. By the time we arrived at Hanley's modest brick house across from mine, the sun had long set. The old mechanic greeted us with a firm handshake and no need for explanations. He'd worked the hangars at Charlotte Airport for 30 years. He knew the life of men who spent more time in transit than at home. "She doesn't know you're back," he said simply. "They've been hauling things all day. Another big truck's due in the morning." He pointed through his curtain to where my driveway lay dimly lit by the street lamp. 2 vans had already come and gone, stripping out what they could. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat at Hanley's kitchen table under the yellow glow of a single bulb, reviewing Marcus's timeline one more time. Every transaction, every false signature, every intercepted message painted the same picture. This wasn't a sudden fling. It was a calculated extraction, a long, patient dismantling of a life I'd worked decades to build. By 3 a.m., Linda texted me, checked property records. She listed the townhouse for sale 2 days ago, asking price 30% below market, forged your name on the listing. My jaw clenched. She wasn't just stealing the furniture, she was trying to erase the house itself. At sunrise, I peered out Hanley's front window. Elena and Tyler were in the driveway loading smaller items into Tyler's black BMW, jewelry boxes, framed silverware, easy-to-carry valuables. At 8:45, right on schedule, a large moving truck pulled up. 3 men jumped out, ready to strip what was left. At 8:55, an unmarked sedan parked behind it, blocking the exit. 2 deputies stepped out along with a court officer carrying a stack of documents. I turned to Hanley. It's time. My heart pounded like an engine spool up as I crossed the street. I stayed just out of view as the deputies knocked. Elena answered, irritation on her face until they introduced themselves. Confusion crept into her features as they explained they had paperwork to serve. Mrs. Mercer, you and the gentleman on premises have been named in multiple filings. She called for Tyler, who came swaggering to the door, arm draped around her shoulders. And that was the moment I stepped into view. The shock on Elena's face was a memory carved in stone. First disbelief, then fear, then frantic calculation. Tyler stiffened, clearly unprepared for a husband who wasn't thousands of miles away in a cockpit. Dan, Elena whispered, you're supposed to be in Germany. I let a thin smile curl my mouth. Surprise. The deputies began handing over the stack of documents: emergency restraining order, asset freeze, nullification of the home listing, divorce petition, citing fraud and conspiracy. Tyler puffed his chest. You can't just barge in. She left you because she's afraid. Save it. I cut him off. Your domestic violence claim was dismissed this morning. Hard to abuse someone from across the Atlantic, and the judge took special interest in your little Plan B. Insurance money isn't a joke, Tyler. His face drained of color. Elena reached out, tears forming fast. Dan, it's not what you think. I was protecting our assets, making investments for us. I gestured toward the moving truck. By selling our home under my forged signature, by draining accounts and transferring funds to your new boyfriend's shell company. Don't insult me. The court officer's voice was sharp. You have 30 minutes to gather personal clothing and toiletries. Everything else remains pending court inventory. As they retreated inside under supervision, I turned on my heel and walked back toward Hanley's. Where are you going? Elena called desperately. I didn't turn around. Home, I said. For the first time in weeks, the word actually meant something. 3 weeks later, I sat in a wood-paneled courtroom in downtown Charlotte, the hum of the ceiling fans barely cutting the summer heat. On one side of the table was Linda and me, files neatly stacked. Across the aisle, Elena sat with her attorney lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting toward the door as though Tyler might appear. He didn't. 2 days after the deputies served the papers, Tyler vanished with what little cash and jewelry Elena had managed to cling to. Marcus had predicted it. The man had a history of evaporating once the money ran dry. Elena was left stranded, her high-priced Miami lawyer now looking less like a savior and more like a drowning partner. Judge Porter entered, adjusted her glasses, and wasted no time. She flipped through the evidence. Linda had prepared bank records showing months of transfers into Elena's maiden name account, forged signatures on the home equity loan, and house listing credit card charges tied directly to Tyler's LLC. Each exhibit was methodically reviewed, every page a nail in the coffin of Elena's case. When the judge reached the intercepted text messages, she stopped reading out loud and looked directly at Elena. Mrs. Mercer, are you aware of the penalties for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud? Elena stammered, whispering frantically to her lawyer. It wasn't like that. Your Honor, she said finally, her voice trembling. Tyler was just joking. I never intended. Save it. Judge Porter interrupted firmly. This court will leave the question of criminal liability to the district attorney. What we're here to decide today is the division of marital property and the validity of your claims. The air in the room was heavy, every eye fixed on the bench. Linda rose, presenting evidence of my overseas assignments. Passport stamps, airline rosters, security badge scans, refuting the domestic violence claim Elena had filed. Mr. Mercer has been verifiably outside the country for 7 consecutive weeks at the time of these allegations, Linda said. Her petition was not only unfounded, it was perjury. The judge nodded. Domestic violence claim is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, Mrs. Mercer's request for spousal support is denied. Elena's lawyer opened his mouth to protest, but the judge raised a hand. Enough. In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a clear pattern of deliberate financial deception. Mrs. Mercer systematically drained joint accounts, forged legal documents, and attempted to sell marital property without her husband's knowledge. Meanwhile, Mr. Mercer consistently fulfilled financial obligations, filed proper taxes, and took steps only to secure his earnings, not to conceal them from lawful oversight. The court rules as follows: all funds siphoned by Mrs. Mercer are to be returned to Mr. Mercer. The Charlotte townhouse remains his sole property. Restitution is ordered for the fraudulent equity loan, and evidence of forgery and conspiracy is referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. The gavel struck wood, final and sharp. Elena's lawyer slumped in his chair while she crumbled into quiet tears, mascara streaking her cheeks. I didn't move. Some victories require no celebration, just silence. After the session ended, Elena tried to approach me in the hallway. Dan, please, just listen. I made mistakes, but I never wanted it to end like this. I was scared. I was lonely. I walked past her without a word. The deputies flanking the corridor ensured she couldn't follow. Outside, the sky was blindingly blue. Marcus was waiting by the curb, leaning against his car with a satisfied half-smile. Clean sweep, he said simply. I exhaled, feeling the weight of months lift off my shoulders. Tyler's absence was almost poetic. He'd used Elena as he had others, and she was now left with nothing but legal bills and a pending criminal record. 6 months later, the case was closed. Elena accepted a plea deal, probation, community service, and an order of restitution she would never realistically repay. She moved in with her sister in Tulsa, working retail, a far cry from the glossy Miami condo she'd dreamed of. Tyler predictably resurfaced in Arizona, courting a newly divorced doctor 10 years older than him. His pattern continued unchecked. By then, I had left aviation behind. 27 years of flight logs, night landings, and lonely hotels was enough. I retired early, turning instead to a quieter life on a piece of land I'd bought years ago through Silverwing Holdings. 40 acres of pine and open meadow outside Missoula, Montana. Elena never knew it existed. The Charlotte townhouse was sold. The furniture, divided heirlooms, shipped north to my new cabin. Marcus sent the final paperwork dissolving Silverwing Holdings, its purpose fulfilled. Standing on the porch of that cabin as the sun sank behind the Rockies, I poured a glass of bourbon and listened to the wind comb through the trees. For the first time in years, no one expected a thing from me. No crew to manage, no wife pretending to miss me, no lawyer waiting on my response. Just quiet, honest air. A recruiter called one evening offering a consulting job with a Canadian cargo carrier, good pay, minimal travel, just advising younger pilots. I told him I'd think about it. But not tonight. Tonight was for me, for the peace I'd earned, for the lesson I now understood in my bones: trust is fragile, preparation is everything, and sometimes the best revenge is simply building a life no one can touch. The months rolled by like the endless taxiways I'd spent half my life crossing. Life in Montana was slow, deliberate, the exact opposite of international flight schedules that once defined me. The cabin sat on 40 acres of pine and meadow, a place no one but Marcus and Linda knew about until it became home. I chopped wood in the mornings, took long walks at dusk, and rediscovered what it felt like to breathe without a calendar dictating my every move. Occasionally, Marcus would call with updates from Charlotte. Elena had tried to appeal the restitution order but was denied. The equity loan forgery sat on her record like a scar, making jobs harder to secure. Tyler predictably had abandoned her within weeks of our court date, stripping the last bits of jewelry and cash she had hidden. She told the judge she had nowhere to go, but her sister in Tulsa offered a spare bedroom. I didn't feel triumph in hearing it, just an odd kind of closure. The woman who once mocked me for being too predictable had gambled everything on a liar who played the same game with every woman he touched. Meanwhile, Linda finalized the paperwork dissolving Silverwing Holdings. The funds were shifted cleanly into my retirement portfolio, taxes paid, chapter closed. Marcus sent me the final packet with a simple note: mission complete. Enjoy your life. I poured a bourbon that night sitting on the porch swing I'd built that summer and let the sound of the forest carry me. For years I had associated silence with loneliness hotel rooms, where the only sound was the drone of an AC unit, apartments where video calls were my only link home. Now, silence meant something entirely different: safety, peace, freedom. I spent hours tinkering in the workshop I'd set up in the converted garage. Old propellers I'd salvaged from junkyards, vintage gauges I picked up at estate sales, tools lined neatly on the wall. Building furniture from pine slabs reminded me of my grandfather's desk that Elena had tried to steal. That piece was now restored again, sitting proudly in my study. Every time I ran my hand across the polished surface, I felt the weight of generations behind me, things that no betrayal could erase. One afternoon, while splitting logs, my phone rang. A recruiter from a Canadian airline offered me a consulting contract, big money, minimal travel, mentoring younger pilots who dreamed of the skies as I once did. I thanked him and said I'd think about it, but inside I already knew the answer could wait. For the first time in decades, I wasn't making decisions from a cramped hotel room or 30,000 feet in the air. Choices could unfold slowly on my terms. In quieter moments, I reflected on how close I'd come to losing everything. If not for Marcus's foresight years earlier, if not for the holding company and the contingency plans, Elena and Tyler might have gutted me completely. Instead, I stood stronger, proof that preparation beats panic. That realization became the backbone of my new philosophy. You can't control turbulence, but you can control how well you maintain the aircraft. Elena's betrayal was turbulence, violent and sudden, but because I had kept my systems checked, my flight path didn't collapse. Tyler was just another storm cloud, impressive from a distance, but empty once you punch through. People often imagine revenge as dramatic confrontations or shouted accusations, but the most effective revenge can be quiet, a steady life rebuilt. Financial security untouched, peace unbroken. Elena lost her freedom to choose. Tyler kept repeating his tired con. But I walked away into a life no one could take from me. That winter, heavy snow blanketed the pines. I lit a fire, poured another bourbon, and reread Marcus's final note: "Enjoy your life." 3 words that once would have sounded hollow but now rang true. I thought about younger pilots still grinding through schedules, away from their families, thinking stability was guaranteed just because paychecks were steady. I wished I could tell them to prepare, to build safeguards, to remember that trust is fragile, even in the people you sleep beside. But maybe the lesson wasn't mine to preach. Maybe it was mine to live. And that was enough. As the fire crackled, I allowed myself to smile. The betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had refined me. The life I now lived was stripped of illusion, built on preparation, and anchored in truth. If there's one lesson I'd pass on to anyone listening, it's this: storms will come sometimes from skies you thought were clear. But if your foundation is strong, if your plan is sound, no storm can take away your wings. By the time spring thawed the snow in Montana, I had settled into a rhythm I hadn't known since before my flying days. Life was measured not by flight schedules or duty rosters, but by the rise and fall of the sun over the tree line. I woke early, brewed strong coffee, and sat on the porch swing with a blanket across my lap, watching deer move cautiously along the meadow. In the afternoons, I repaired the old barn at the edge of the property or cut trails through the forest. My muscles ached in a different way than they did after long flights. This was the ache of honest work, grounding, tangible. Occasionally, Linda called with updates on the last threads of legal matters. Elena had completed her plea deal, 5 years of probation and restitution she'd never managed to repay. The district attorney had chosen not to pursue heavier charges, but the mark on her record was enough to shadow every job application. Last I heard, she was working part-time in a department store, clocking in under fluorescent lights instead of sipping cocktails in Miami. Tyler had predictably vanished into another woman's orbit, this time a newly divorced surgeon in Scottsdale. I didn't care to follow the details. Patterns repeat themselves until someone breaks them, and Tyler had no reason to change what kept paying. Marcus visited twice that spring, bringing a cooler of Chicago-style deep dish pizza and a stack of financial reports. We grilled on the porch, drank beer, and laughed about how a pilot and an accountant had once hatched a secret contingency company over whiskey, never really believing we'd need it. "Best insurance policy you ever bought," he said, lifting his glass. "Not a single plane involved." I nodded. He was right. The foresight had saved me not just money, but sanity. Without it, Elena's betrayal could have left me broke and broken. Instead, I had options. Options are freedom. One afternoon, I got a call from an old captain I'd flown with out of Frankfurt years earlier. He'd transitioned into training younger pilots and wanted me to join him as a consultant. "You've got 3 decades of experience," he said. "These kids need mentors. It's not about flying anymore. It's about passing on what you've learned." I told him I'd consider it. For the first time, I realized the prospect didn't fill me with dread. Teaching meant stability, staying in one place using knowledge without surrendering peace. Maybe I thought I could guide others away from the same blind spots that had nearly wrecked me. Nights in Montana were unlike any I'd known at 30,000 feet. The sky stretched endless, littered with stars untouched by city haze. I'd sit by the fire pit, bourbon in hand, and let the silence remind me of everything I'd regained. Trust, I realized, is fragile, but resilience is not. Betrayal had taught me that you can't control what others choose, but you can control the systems you build to protect yourself. I thought about Elena sometimes, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She had chosen excitement over loyalty, quick promises over steady foundations. Tyler had offered her the illusion of freedom, but it was nothing more than a cage lined with borrowed money. I didn't hate her. I just didn't know her anymore. The woman I married had been replaced long before that midnight text. I wrote in a journal at night, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. Pages filled with reflections, the discipline of preparation, the weight of trust, the meaning of solitude. Writing helped me close the loop, turning chaos into lessons. One entry I underlined twice. Sometimes the best revenge is peace. Sometimes the greatest win is walking away intact. By summer, wildflowers covered the meadow. I rebuilt the old wooden fence, hammered every nail myself, and felt a satisfaction I never got from polished cockpits or corporate schedules. The land didn't betray. It gave back exactly what you put into it. That was a truth I could live with. Autumn came early in Montana, the kind that paints every tree in shades of gold and crimson. The mornings grew colder, the air sharp with the scent of pine and wood smoke. I stacked firewood by the cabin and felt the rhythm of the season settling into me. It was the first time in years that my life wasn't measured by flight schedules or bank transfers, but by something simpler. Daylight weather, the steady beat of my own pulse. Marcus called sometimes just to check in, and Linda sent the occasional email with legal footnotes that closed out lingering paperwork. Elena had faded into the background, a name mentioned only in passing. Tyler's trail had disappeared into another city, another relationship. None of it mattered anymore. Their choices no longer had power here. One evening, I received a letter from a younger pilot I had mentored years earlier. He'd heard I retired and wanted advice. His words struck me. "How do you keep balance when the job keeps you away from home? How do you know your life isn't slipping through your fingers?" I folded the letter and stared into the fire. The truth was, I hadn't balanced it well at all. I'd built a career, but assumed loyalty at home would be as steady as a flight plan. I never imagined someone would dismantle everything piece by piece while smiling at me through video calls. The lesson I wrote back was simple. Never confuse stability with trust. Prepare for storms even when skies look clear. Love fiercely, but protect yourself wisely. That's not cynicism, it's survival. A week later, I agreed to take on part-time consulting for the Canadian airline. It wasn't about the money. It was about using my years of experience to help others avoid mistakes both in the cockpit and in life. I'd fly up once a month, lecture on procedures, mentor rookies, then come home to Montana. It was a balance that felt right, a rhythm between past and present. Sometimes in the evenings, I'd sit on the porch swing, bourbon glass sweating in my hand, and think about what I'd endured. The midnight text, the empty bank accounts, the humiliation of betrayal, it all could have broken me. But instead, it refined me. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be loud or violent. Sometimes the sharpest revenge is a quiet life built with integrity untouchable by those who tried to take it away. Elena lost her freedom to choose. Tyler was trapped in his own cycle, but I walked away intact. The greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was here among the pines, in the sound of wind that answered to no one. If anyone asked me now what I carried from all of it, I'd say this: don't assume the people closest to you can't turn into strangers, and don't assume storms won't come. Build your foundation strong, protect your future, and when betrayal knocks, let your preparation answer for you. Life isn't about avoiding turbulence. It's about flying steady through it and landing safely on your own terms. That night, as the sky turned indigo and stars began to scatter across the horizon, I felt something I hadn't known in years. Complete peace. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop, wasn't waiting for betrayal to surface, wasn't waiting for the next emergency call. I was simply living free and whole. And that, more than any court ruling or financial safeguard, was the real victory.